This is TWiT.
We have followed on this show throughout a very short, condensed period of time the story that is Quibi. And it was just announced yesterday that Quibi was not long for this world, although we kind of already assumed that, but now we have the official word. So joining me to talk about why Quibi failed so hard, so fast, is Josh Constine, VC at Signalfire and author of the Moving Product newsletter. Welcome back to the show, Josh.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me back.
Yeah, it's always great to get you on. We do appreciate your time, so thank you. So back when Quibi launched, you were, you and many people, but you were critical of the Quibi model. What exactly did you see back then? What was the future that you were telling at that point?
Sure. So I think it's always important to start off with the fact that like failure is normal part of startups, and nobody wants to be mean about these companies. Like it doesn't give you an excuse to be mean just because somebody failed. But by offering constructive criticism, we can help flag pitfalls, make sure more people don't fall into them in the future, and help sort of fertilize that next crop of startups. And so that's why I wanted to give this critical analysis of Quibi. So the big things that they did wrong. First, they started with what does Hollywood want rather than what do viewers want. They did not understand the mobile viewing audience, and instead they ported in these directors who were used to making 30 or 90-minute pieces of video, try to get them to make 5-minute pieces of video. Honestly, I feel like if Quibi had just given a $20 million budget to each of the top 50 TikTok stars, they would have had a lot better content than what they normally had. The second was they had no screenshots. Now, I know that their DRM policies and the fact that they rent their content instead of owning it prohibited them from allowing traditional screenshots, but they should have done like TikTok, offered downloadable trailers that people could share or pre-approved screenshots or press shots that people could share. That way people could actually make memes, because you can't be part of the cultural zeitgeist right now as a piece of content if people can't make memes about you. Then there was also the sluggish pacing of content, because the directors that they brought in just didn't actually understand how quick you have to get to the action on mobile, the way that a TikTok is super dense, has this concept of content density, ha-has or ahas per second. And instead, it felt like these were like movies, and they'd have these long establishing shots. It took forever to actually get to the action. Plus, the discoverability on the app was poor. It was really tough to get personalized introductions to new content. You were sort of basically scrolling through screenshots instead of quick clips that would show the highlights of a show. At the best, it would just start off the first episode of a show rather than giving you a highlight or a real trailer the way that we would expect with a movie. And then finally, it is just an audacious or really just reckless move to start a social video app with no social features, or a mobile video app with no social features in 2020. You couldn't follow people. There was no second screening ability to sort of chat with or type or audio chat with friends. You couldn't see what other people were watching. There was no sort of live streaming of the creators. They really did nothing to help people want to get involved with the shows and build a community around their programming. And so, for those four reasons, I think Quibi really didn't validate its market or validate its product before raising way too much money. And so it acted nothing like a traditional startup. And so that's why I think it deserves some criticism here. And I hope that future video app and social media platforms take this into account. Use native creators who actually understand the format you're building. Embrace virality through memes and screenshotting. Make sure that you're making content that is immediately engaging if you're building on mobile where there's so much distraction. And build in every possible social feature, because nobody wants to consume this stuff alone.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting what you say about the lack of social features, which kind of, for me, points to the fact, we've got Katzenberg and Whitman, two very, very well-known, very successful people launching a service almost at the outset. It was like, okay, we get what you're trying to do, but are you doing it effectively for now? It seemed like a general misunderstanding of how technology and the internet works today, the kind of a disconnect between the entertainment industry and technology, and how it lacked the social features, but it did do one very interesting technological thing, and that was kind of the kind of switching of angles for vertical versus landscape, for portrait versus landscape. And to a certain degree, it seemed like it Oh, sorry, go for it.
I didn't find that to be interesting at all. I tried their turnstile technology. The fact was that, yeah, they basically sometimes there'd be a shot where it'd be a long shot, and if you turned your phone vertical, it'd be a little bit closer up. Or if they had like two boxes set up wide shot, they'd stack them when you did vertical. But the content wasn't built to understand that. It wasn't like, oh, you can see anything different on vertical versus horizontal. They weren't really, the creators weren't embracing it. And that's again why it comes back to you need native creators to a platform. And that was not what was going on here.
Yeah, it also kind of assumes that the person that's viewing wants to be in control of some of these things. And I think by and large, maybe some people feel like they do want to be in control of, let's say, the perspective that you get when you switch from landscape to portrait. But I think by and large, most people, they just want to play something and they want to watch it, which was kind of another part of the disconnect where you couldn't even really cast this content if you wanted to watch it in the living room, which is where most people were because of the COVID and where we are right now. In announcing the end of Quibi, what have they said as far as like the failures here, and do you agree with them?
Yeah, unfortunately, in that mea culpa letter, they didn't really culpa that much. They blamed the failure on two things. One was COVID and people not being out and about where they would maybe want this sort of shorter form video content, and also that that people didn't want another mobile video app, which is just patently absurd. You know, we saw a 22% increase in mobile video viewing during quarantine. Other video services like Netflix experienced massive growth in their usership and viewership. And meanwhile, you know, mobile video apps like TikTok have obviously been exploding in popularity. And so I just didn't really make any sense. Honestly, I think that this was better for them. COVID was a perfect time. Everyone was trapped at home with nothing to do. They didn't have all of those other interceding gatherings or social events to take them away from it. And in reality, Quibi's content is not that short. Like short form content is 15 seconds to 60 seconds. That's something you can watch in line for your coffee or, you know, while you're in you have a moment of downtime. But Quibi's 5 or 10 minute episodes, those actually don't fit that well into those little moments in your life. And you'd honestly probably just be better off watching 5 minutes of a Netflix show and then returning to it later to watch the rest of it. So I just didn't really buy those reasons that they said that the Quibi failed. And I would have liked to see them be a little bit more honest about not understanding they needed native creators and not embracing virality.
Yeah, that reminds me of something that you wrote back in August. You talked about, you wrote about content density and really kind of pointed to how Quibi had failed to deliver on that front. Why does that matter so much?
Sure. So content density is this concept of that you want to pack content with as many ha-has, oohs, ahs, or ahas per second. And that's what TikTok does so well. You know, we got really exhausted with social media stories because oftentimes people spend as much time creating them as they expect us to spend consuming them. You know, they just hold their phone up and pan it across what they're doing and say, oh, I spent 15 seconds recording. You should spend 15 seconds watching that. That's low content density. That's diluted content. But what TikTok does so well is it incentivizes creators to spend a ton of time up front, 2, 5, 10 hours making a 15 or 60-second video so that they pack every single second with punchlines or informative content, and they immediately jump right into the content. They don't offer a long sort of diluted introduction. You know, I think of like YouTube videos where oftentimes creators will spend more time just introducing their content, being like, yo, what's up, my fam? Subscribe to me, smash the subscribe button. Before they even get to their content, a TikTok star's already delighted you or entertained you or educated you. And so mobile services really thrive on this content density. And so whether you think of messaging as being the really familiar form of high density and TikToks being the more unfamiliar creator-focused form of high density, those are what's doing really well on mobile. Whereas more diluted types of content like live streams where you might just want to watch for a while in the background, you can't watch stuff in the background on mobile. And so that's kind of stuff works a lot better on desktop. And so I think if you're building a mobile service, you need to be thinking about how can you maximize the density of your content so it's worthwhile and people should actually ignore all those distractions in the world and focus on what you're producing.
Shifting gears just a little bit before we wrap up here, I saw one comparison on Twitter yesterday that took just like the basic numbers behind Quibi, right? 1.8 billion. And then compared that to female founders in 2020, 1.9 billion. What is your take on the comparison? Like immediately I see that I'm like, oh, that's wrong. Like, why is this the way it is? Obviously, like back then when Quibi was launching, they would not know that it would fail, and they would not know, hey, maybe it's a better use of our money to like fund female founders, let's say. Although that would be a better world in this case. What's your take on that?
I mean, absolutely, there is a huge way to go in the venture industry to funding more female founders. And it's actually a huge business opportunity for venture because these are underutilized founders. People have great ideas who are underfunded. So you can probably get a pretty good deal on those startups. And we should just be piling more funding into great, diverse founders of all different backgrounds. Now, it's important to remember that Quibi does have a female co-founder, Meg Whitman, but still, and I do think that a lot of that money might have gone to better use if it had instead of just, it's not just exactly who it went to, but how it was spent. Most startups, they take a small pre-seed, angel, seed round, and they validate their ideas in the market. They confirm that customers actually want what they're building, and then they take in a little bit more money to actually build out that service. Then they take in a little bit more money to actually promote and scale that service. And so you don't end up with a lot of wasted money because you have to validate your assumptions at every step. And Quibi didn't do that. Quibi skipped right over that step to raising $1.75 billion up front, more like a Hollywood movie. But this wasn't like a movie where there was a surefire return if you just get a bunch of big name actors and slap a superhero plot on it. This was something that was really different. They were trying to invent a new medium, and trying to invent something, you need to validate your assumptions, get out of the building, talk to people who are going to be the end consumers. And it felt like this was more built on a hunch of the founders rather than a validated concept. But yes, I'm happy that a lot of that money did end up in creatives' hands, helping bring more voices to Hollywood. And I know there were some great diverse creators that were funded through Quibi, but I absolutely think that that money could have been spent better funding incredible female founders and diverse founders who validated their assumptions step by step.